This is Now What? Life after redundancy. When your job disappears, but you don't. Hello. I'm Stevie, and you're joining me on my journey through and hopefully past redundancy, where I'm regularly asking myself the question, now what? And if this week you've heard someone that you know complain about how hard work is, while you yourself have been sat there thinking, I'm a little bit unemployed at the moment, I can't relate, you're in the right place. This show is part practical, part perspective, and a little bit pep talk without the awkward bit. And today's episode is one I've been looking forward to for a while because we're flipping the lens, flipping the tape, flipping the script, flipping the tape. We're flipping something. We spend a lot of time on this show talking about redundancy from the inside. The spiraling, the inbox refreshing, that specific kind of dread that comes from a rejection email arriving when you're doing the school run. But today, we're hearing from the other side of the coin, script, desk, the thing that we flipped. We're hearing from the other side of it. Because I sat down with Neil Johns, who works as a recruiter for Merje, to get his honest take on what he actually sees. The patterns, the pitfalls, the things candidates do that help them, and the things that quietly don't. So no fluff, no recruitment speak, just what it genuinely looks like from where he's sitting. But before we get into any of that, if you get something out of this show, I would really appreciate your support. It costs you nothing, and all you have to do is follow or subscribe wherever you're listening. Leaving a review massively helps. And ultimately, this helps this show find other people who may need it. That's the whole ask. But if you need support, you can visit theinvisiblequeue.co.uk, which is a community we set up to connect people navigating this journey with each other. There's a forum there. You're more than welcome to come along and say hi. And if you'd like to contact this show, if you have a topic that you'd like to suggest or something you'd like to reach out on, visit thenowwhat.co.uk. Enough of all that. Let's get into it. So today, we're speaking with Neil Johns. Neil's a director at Merje, which is a specialist talent solutions business. They pair candidates with roles across a real spread of organizations, everything from startups and FinTechs through to national banking groups and global businesses. And a lot of these clients stick around and work with them long term rather than as a one-off, which is relevant to absolutely everything we're about to discuss. It tells you something about how they operate. Long-term relationship seems to be the whole model, not just something they say in an interview to a podcast host. So here's that conversation. Hello, Neil. Fantastic to speak with you as always. Just before we begin, it'd be great if you could just tell us a little bit about who you are, what you recruit for, and roughly how long you've been doing this.
Absolutely. So, my name's Neil Johns. I recruit for Merje. We're a business that recruits across predominantly financial services and all the support functions. Myself specifically, I've recruited across contact centres in sort of mid to senior roles for the last 20 years. And also more recently, I also recruit for another business called Ginger, which is more in the hospitality sector. So quite unusually for someone in my industry, I've got two hats across two different industries.
Before we get into detail of some of the mechanics of your work, it'd be just great to have like a high level understanding of when you're first meeting with a candidate, what do you find is the most common thing they say to you in the first conversation that makes you quietly wince?
I guess the thing that always does make me wince is if I have an initial interaction with somebody and they're seeing it already as an incredibly transactional relationship. And they basically, if they've inquired, for example, about a job, and they just go, send me the JD. Because what that automatically signals to me is that they see no value in this relationship. They have a thought process that says, I know more about this job anyway. I don't really know why I've got to deal with you. You're just a gateway to getting to where I need to be. Whereas actually seeing that there's value in the relationship, two, probably what I know about that opportunity, and three, the broader conversation that we can have. So I guess it's people going into things quite close-minded, really.
It's a really good point. I think there's a natural misconception about the recruiter and candidate relationship, and it'd be great to hear your perspective around how you see that gap really coming through. So where most people imagine the recruitment relationship working a particular way and versus your side of it and what's actually happening, what kind of misconceptions do you run into?
Listen, it's an unregulated industry, which I don't think particularly helps it. And I think you need to find your brood. And part of the job search and working with recruiters, I mean, one of the things that I would genuinely actively encourage people to do is not see a recruiter as just finding a job. So when you're in role, use a recruiter for what is happening across the market, what trends are you seeing, what patterns are you seeing, what's going on out there, because actually there's a lot of value add stuff you can get from a recruiter. Some of the longest relationships I've had with people are the people that understand it's a 360 relationship. And I think what a lot of people do when they engage with recruiters is they see it as a very short-termist, you've got me a job, thanks very much, I move on, never need to deal with you again. Almost that sort of estate agent type relationship, rather than seeing this as actually, there's loads of information that you've got. There's loads of stuff that you do out there in the network in terms of introducers and people that you work with, and just being a lot more open-minded. But I think the toughest bit, Steve, to be honest, is finding people that you want to work with. And again, that should probably come from within your network. When you are either in role or looking for a role, speak to some of your peers that you respect and go, look, who do you work with? Who do you value? Rather than, I guess, just going for throwing a dart in the dark and trying to speak to anybody, really.
That makes a lot of sense. With the context of this show and kind of that focus on redundancy, when you see someone registering with you while they're navigating this, and perhaps it's in the early stages where things are a bit raw, are there any signs that jump out to you that tell you that individual isn't ready, even if they think they are?
Yeah, I guess some of the signs that you tend to see, you can sort of feel a panic. Everyone's got different triggers. So for some people, getting the next job is about money. So it's like, I need to go and earn money. I've got to get, keep my home going, keep my family going. And, from my perspective, that's something that I always really respect and understand. But then equally, if someone's just phoning you up and going, I can do, as an example, that customer values job you've got there, I can do that. I can do the head of collections job you've got. I can do the head of resource planning job you've got. I can also be a chef. You go, whoa, calm down. Like, let's sort of see, where are your skills? Where are your values aligned? What sort of business do you want to work for? What is it that ultimately you're looking for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years? I guess it's pace, because ultimately, I think our human instinct when we lose our job or we're made redundant or we move on is to go, I need to get the next job. I need to be in there by Monday, because then my mind is at peace and we can move on. I guess
you have just triggered this thought in my head around the Swiss Army knife recruitment process, where you're like, I can do all of these things. I can juggle, I can mime. It's going to be fantastic.
And I can't tell you how many times I've introduced myself, told people what I do, be it at networking events, at social events or whatever. And I'll tell them exactly what I do. And within 5 minutes, someone will turn around to me and go, oh, my mate Joe's a mechanic. He needs a new job. Can you help him out? And I'm like, no. It's literally not what I do. And that's not where I can add value for you.
Makes sense. And another thing I wanted to just pick up with you is around CVs. And I think everybody has views on CVs, and I'm definitely not an exception. I know that mine's gone through multiple rewrites, and I think one contained at least a short memoir of my past lives. But it'd be great to understand from your perspective, when you receive a CV for the first time, what
Sure.
do you actually look for in those initial moments, and what kind of kills a candidate's chances before you've even got down to the experience section?
Sure. So I'll give you my view. And before I say this, I think the important thing to say about CVs is largely they're an opinion and an insight. So what I'm about to say, someone quite conversely and very easily can go, oh, no, that guy's talking rubbish. That's not how I do it. I wouldn't do that. But what I can say from the way that I see it is post-pandemic attention spans are terrible. So the way that we engage with any form of media means that our brains are looking for the information that we want way quicker than we used to. So if you think about the opening gambit to a CV, generally it's a personal profile, professional summary, whatever it may be. And historically, I think we made those quite wordy, quite thesaurusy, and generally they said the sum total of bugger all, right? And what we're looking for now in industry, or what the hiring manager is ultimately looking for, is what can you save me? What can you generate me? So they're looking for metrics, they're looking for value add, and what do you do? So what I generally implore people to do is to have an opening gambit. So for yourself, it would be customer values lead who has worked across multiple projects, resulting in a X percentage uplift, so 20% uplift, and possibly manage a budget of £1 million, blah, blah, blah. So that we've got straight and right from the off, we've got these metrics that the hiring manager that can grab onto. Then generally what people do is put core skills, key deliverables. So again, generally, Steve, are quite wordy and say the sum total of nothing. So I say if you want to put those in from an ATS system perspective, if you think that they come up in keyword searches and all that sort of stuff, which I totally get, keep them in there, but drop them to the bottom of your CV. Because I can tell you now, a hiring manager or a third-party intermediary doesn't necessarily want to read through, I have done customer services, I have done resource planning, I have worked in multi-skilled environments. It's just a bit waffle. And then we go straight into most current role, and this has to all be about the so what factor. So each line within that, if it hasn't got a what did that mean, if it hasn't got the metric, if it hasn't got the value, I always implore people to be it your best friend, your other half, basically whoever's going to be your biggest critic. If they read a line of your CV and ultimately they go, so what, take it out. And I'm a big believer in, if people talk about 2-page, 3-page CVs and all this sort of stuff, forget all that. Post-pandemic attention spans, to me, if you've not nailed it in the first half to 3/4 of a page of your CV, they're going to move on to the next one. And ultimately, how I generally sort of look at a CV or try and get people to structure the CV is, if that job is paying £70,000 and the total value of your package is £100,000 once you've thrown everything in, ultimately that business is probably looking for somewhere between a 3 to 5 times return on investment. So make your CV within the first half a page, 3/4 of a page, punch the consumer in the face and say, there's your value.
That makes so much sense. And yeah, I considered something like that previously, but I'd not thought about it in those exact terms. So that's just selfishly, that's massively helpful. So thank you. So linked to that, there is definitely a thing that happens to folk who are navigating redundancy where people either massively undersell themselves because their confidence has taken a knock, or they kind of overcorrect and come across mildly defensive about, why they left the role.
Yeah.
And it'd be good to understand what that looks like from where you're sitting and how it affects your interactions with the hiring managers and clients that you work with.
So I think transparency is key again, and this is where these value add relationships and having historical relationships with be it me or anyone else that you deal with really comes to the fore. Because if you say to me, I worked in my last business, I was made redundant, actually I didn't like the culture, I didn't really get it, that gives me way more to go at. To go, right, okay, well, let's get under the skin of that. And what is it you're looking for? What are we targeting? What matters to you at this stage in your career? What are your key drivers? Because I think without being transparent, you're not going to get the level of value out of someone like me that you should do. Because if you just say to me, "Oh, I love that job, love that business, they were great," someone else like that, but you actually hated it, there's no value in that. Like, you almost see a relationship with someone like me. There is no interest for me to go to your future employer and go, "Actually, Steve hated his old boss, thought the company's values, weren't worth the paper they were wrote on." That's not what people like me are trying to do. I'm trying to extract, how do I get the best out of you to ultimately represent you for a business that I think that you will then naturally fit into. So I think just having that level of transparency and trust, really. But again, some of that will be about valued relationships. That's why I'm saying, don't see a recruiter as a relationship that you have when you just need a job. Have those relationships when you're in role, and then when you are at that point, you can go, "Right, Neil, actually flipping the narrative here. I don't need to use you for me. For the business I'm in, I need to use you for me. And this is where I'm at."
The other thing I wanted to get your view on was the concept of volume applying.
Yeah.
So again, it wouldn't necessarily be directly through you, but I'm sure you've got a view on the approach that individuals may take, where they're firing off 50 applications a week and, scattergun approach, hoping that something lands. Do you see that strategy working, or does it tend to backfire?
Backfire massively. And I think if I was to describe the market to give you insight about what this market is really about. So this is a decent market. I think there's a lot of work about. Separately, we've had conversations about, I always say to people, in this current market, someone like me is about your 15 to 20 percentile chance of getting your next opportunity. Your 80 percentile chance is your own network. And the reason is, this is the narrowest market I've ever seen in terms of attitude to risk and attitude to, I guess, skills adoption or product adoption. So scattergunning in this market is going to get you nowhere, because what I see happening in the market is, if you're a customer experience leader within banking, your next job, I would say there's a really high percentile chance that your next job is going to be as a customer experience leader in banking. And as much as industry will turn around to you and say, "Oh, no, yeah, we're happy to go and look at another sector," can happen. And I will gladly be the guy at the end of the phone call if someone phones me and goes, "Actually, I completely switched lanes. I've gone into a different sector, different product." Perfect. But if I'm on the job search and it's me first person, my next job that I was targeting, if Merge were to make me redundant tomorrow, the people who are going to recruit me generally are going to be within financial services, operations, probably contact center type recruitment in this market. So scattergun in this market is probably wasting your time. It's wasting the other people's time. Be targeted. Be targeted by product. Be targeted by industry. Be targeted by network. Because if someone can make a hire at the minute that reduces the propensity for risk for that person to go wrong, that's what they're going to do.
I think you touched on another point there around kind of the scattergun approach. And I know that the conversations I've had with folk who are going through redundancy, who hadn't kind of done external applications previously, they're interacting with ATS for the first time in this principle of keyword filtering. And it feels like a mystery box in terms of, there's so much conversation out there in terms of, screening for ATS, and keywords are really important, but no one's very kind of pinpointy in terms of what that actually means. From your perspective, how much does ATS really dictate what gets through to a human? And is there anything that candidates should be doing that most aren't?
I would say so. This is one where I could potentially get slaughtered by a number of internal recruiters who say what I'm about to say is not true. But the number of stories you hear about people who are getting rejected by ATS systems at silly times in the morning, and all this sort of stuff, that for me personally, it does seem, has the appearance that there is definitely, some sort of auto reject filter on certain people who are applying for things. Now, I know that as an industry, they will turn around and go, "That's probably not so." But I take that out of the system. I go, take ownership of your own job search. And if you are of a mindset that there's a chance that you may get rejected by an ATS system, and you can work out where that hiring manager or who that hiring manager is on something like a LinkedIn, or you can find it via various sources like looking at Google search and all that sort of stuff, drop them a bit of a punchy email and do an intro and have a look at what their issues are, some of the key things you can pull out of that job advert. Drop them a bit of a spiky email that provokes a reaction and goes, listen, this is what I can do. Why put yourself through a ATS type system response when and we can all see it, the 200 responses, 3. But again, I wouldn't let those numbers put you off, because going back to your scattergun approach question, there are a lot of people out there that are just applying for everything. And if you've got someone who, with the greatest respect, is doing a bar job, and they're going and applying for the head of operations for Barclays, they're not going to get it. And if they apply for 20 of those jobs that are similarly around that, they're not going to get it. But they are increasing the volume of those applications that go through. So I guess my key point about ATS systems, and even forget my answer about auto reject pieces, take it out of the process. So if you've genuinely got to a point where you go, do you know what, I'm throwing in loads of applications here, I'm just getting rejects, nothing's coming back, take ownership of that and go, how do I negate that process? Now, you might take the odd slap on the wrist from someone who goes, you've got out of process, going through the ATS system, blah, 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 blah. My argument would be, play the odds. Play the odds.
Brilliant. It's a really good point. And you've made me think around that principle of following up on that. So I like the concept of both a spiky and a punchy email. I guess in terms of following up with a network contact, when do you see that chasing is the right call, and where's that line between, someone being keen and professional and someone having HR being alerted of their name? There feels that there's a gap there. Where do you kind of see that landing?
And listen, I think from a third-party perspective, we always have to be very aware that if someone's doing that, generally there are triggers and reasons for it. So it's our job to try and, I guess, educate and say, look, this isn't going to get you the greatest response, because this is now looking a bit, inverted commas, desperate, needy, whatever adjective you want to put in there. I think, again, if you've got the right relationship with the right recruiters, and I guess it sounds a bit repetitive at this point, Steve, but I think it's about making those relationships with the recruiters for them to go, listen, I've got this. When there's an update, you are going to know about it. You don't need to follow up in the way that you are. But then on the other side of that, I don't think there's any issue with dropping an email if you've not heard anything. Because listen, have I not gone back to somebody on a job at some point that they've applied for or have had an interview for, and maybe there's some feedback that I've not done simply because I forgot? Absolutely. I'm human. So if you drop me an email going, I had an interview 5-6 days ago, I've not heard anything, and you've not heard from me, there might be an issue there, and the issue might be me. So there's no issue. There's not a problem with that. But I think it all just comes about thinking in your mind's eye, if you were the third person and that was, say, the third email you'd sent to someone that week going, what jobs have you got? What's this? What's happening? Blah, blah, blah. How would you feel about it?
No good.
There's your answer, isn't it? Yeah.
That's a good shout. And another point you touched on before, so around the market being quite restrictive at the moment, but there was obviously when, again, folk are going through that redundancy period, there is that opportunity for self-reflection, and it may be that they suddenly have a desire to slightly change their career path. So
Sure.
Applying for things they might be underqualified for, or making a pivot. What do you think is probably the best approach for them than just sending a CV and hoping? And it may be that you've already given me this answer in terms of that networking piece.
Yeah.
But is there anything more kind of that should be in the mix for consideration?
Yeah, well, I do think you're right. I probably have given slightly the answer. So utilization of network is key. So if you were going to pivot, and I'd say change sectors or something completely, or what is quite common in current market, and again the post-pandemic era is take it a step back. So quite often now get or have people who are in quite senior roles who go, don't need it, don't need any of that. What I want is just a nice hands-on love job where I'm back with the people, the stuff that I really like, but stimulated by. So I think network definitely. I think if you are going to pivot, remember about product. So whilst you might be in a different product at the minute, how can you associate the products that you've dealt with into whatever industry you're going to pivot into? So if you were a CX manager within a banking world and you wanted to go to a telecoms world, how can you therefore associate it to the regulated industries that you worked in? How can you associate or give an affiliation with the digitization of those products? So I think trying to make it relatable to the new industry, as relatable as you can. And again, going on the metrics piece that we talked about before, that's also quite key. I think if you can demonstrate that you can flip into a new market, but you've got an understanding of what their metrics and needs are, that would be pertinent, I would say.
No, that's brilliant. So moving on slightly, I know that the multiple conversations I've had with folk kind of on this same journey, I've heard a few times kind of the story that they're treating their recruiter as their primary job search strategy. But that also starts to sound like they're extending it to registering with as many as possible and then waiting. What do you see as the pitfalls there? Kind of, is there any mistakes being made?
Massively. So, and again, my industry, I'd imagine at this point, if they did listen to this, will be throwing things at the radio. But I say that you should almost use us again in that 15 to 20%. So if you're just relying on third-party suppliers like me, that means that you're neglecting 80% of where the rest of the work is, which is your network. And by your network, that doesn't mean, right, well, if I speak to Bob, Mary, John, Fred, who I've known for 10 years, and they're in my immediate network, and that's really comfortable for me to have those really comfortable conversations because I know them really well, that's not it. What this is about is your ex-managers, your ex-leaders that you maybe not even spoke to for 5-10 years. It's about reaching out to them and going, well, really sorry, hope you've got 5 minutes. Be great to pick your brains. I'm going onto the market. Be really good. I really respect you as a leader. Be really good to get your opinion. It's not about messaging going, hi, I haven't spoken for 10 years, but got any jobs? Because that's just going to get an instant straight bar. No, thank you. And there's a reason we've not spoken for 10 years. It's about nurturing those relationships. And the key thing about all job searching, and not necessarily, the scenario that we're talking about now, the most networks, the most in tune you should be with people is when you're in role. And the key reason that most of us aren't is because of time. Ultimately, once we get in role, there isn't the time to do it. I would say make that part of your job. Like literally factor it in to go, if it's networking events, if it's industry events, if it's recruiter third parties, if it's third party vendor events, get to them. Because that is where the value of your network, you will feel both in role and out of role.
No, that's brilliant. That's great advice. And you touched on this before, and I think you've alluded to a few points on this already. To my mind, kind of that fantastic recruiter candidate relationship is kind of that open communication. It'd be good to get kind of your understanding or your explanation as to what a good recruiter can genuinely do for a candidate that a candidate can't do for themselves, and
Sure.
where does a relationship have limits?
So what a good recruiter can do, they can probably tell you what jobs you should go for and shouldn't. And even when sometimes you think, yeah, but I think I'd be great at that. Because what you've got to remember is they know the other people are in play. So I I've had many, many times over the years where someone said to me, listen, I'm perfect for that job. I can do that job. I can do that standing on my head. It's absolute no-brainer. And I'm looking at the other 3 CVs that are going forward for that job going, with the greatest respect, you're not going to get it. And having those firm and honest conversations, and when you're at that relationship, when you've got that relationship with a recruiter, that to me is like sort of the perfect space you're in. Now, that wouldn't negate me going, tell you what, if you want to go into that process and initiate conversation, we can do it, then absolutely. But I think, again, it's forging those relationships to understand that someone's not just going to tell you what you want to hear. Where you get those value out of those relationships is what the market looks like, what your realistic prospects in terms of, diversify. Where can you add your key strengths? I can tell you now that if you phoned up a lot of recruiters that you don't have a relationship with, they wouldn't tell you to go out and use your own network. They wouldn't tell you to go out and, get beyond using me. So if we're working with a recruiter and they're just trying to push you down and go, right, I've got this. Don't speak to anyone else. Don't talk to anyone. You're just going to use me. I'm going to send you everywhere. Spray and pray. Send your CV all over the place. All that horrible sort of stuff that does happen in recruitment. It's part of the industry, unfortunately. It's about really understanding who's worth working with. It's the same, really, if you think about how you use your recruiter, it's the same as how you use any other vendor relationship. So from a CX perspective, if you were going out working with a third-party business or whichever outsourcer you were going to use with regards to your CX piece, you would look at them and go, what are your values like? Are you actually going to treat our customers in the same way? Would I recommend you to someone else? How would you make me feel? And ultimately, is this a relationship I'll value in another 6, 12, 18 months?
That's a very good point. And I know there's a vibe that I've caught on LinkedIn a few times, and I know that a few conversations I've had have touched upon this, but there can sometimes be a sense among candidates that recruiters can be protective about a role. And by that, I mean that they're reluctant to share the company that it's actually for, or they may be slow to pass feedback on. So I am very conscious that there are a lot of moving parts in the background from the recruiter side, but it'd be great to get your view as to what could actually be going on in those moments.
Sure. There could be some sensitivities within the role. So, is there someone currently in role that potentially might be moved on by the business? There could be sensitivities about external recruitment generally because of the perception of that business right now. And they may be making other redundancies elsewhere in the business, or other things are going on that you don't know about. It may well be that they don't want to tell you the business because they don't think you're right for the job. And they think that if they tell you, you'll go and do your own thing, and then that becomes a conflict for them. I would say again, it's all about, and I know it's sounding repetitive, but it's about that valued relationship piece. Because, for example, if it was you and you were like, Neil, why won't you tell me who the business is? I would either give you the direct answer, or I'm going to say, listen, Steve, there's a reason I can't tell you. Well, as we go further down the line, we'll get there. So it's just about, there are a number of reasons. I think some businesses, and I don't like doing the slate the industry piece. There are definitely businesses that don't tell you the business because there probably isn't a job. There are definitely businesses that they tell you what's going on because they're actually working on something, which again goes back. So it'll always go back to that valued relationship piece. Work with recruiters that are going to value you and been recommended to you, got the same values base as you have, really.
Brilliant. And on that point, it'd be great to hear from your vast experience in supporting candidates. Has there been anything that a candidate's ever done that has caused you to go to bat for them when you might not have otherwise? And I'd like to hear the flip side as well. Has there been anything that a candidate's done that has made you kind of go, are you okay?
I do remember years ago, and obviously we'll keep names and whatever out of this, but I do remember a hiring manager turning round to a woman that I've dealt with for a number of years, and asked her, when was her plans for children, and was that imminent? Yeah, and that one caused me to go to bat and subsequently not work with them anymore. And that wasn't that long ago, and it's terrifyingly. And it was a brand that people would see as a really soft, lovely brand. If you were to name it, you go, I bet they're a great company to work for. So that was quite surprising. And then from a candidate perspective, on the not work with them, I think the only time really I've ever had with a candidate and not working with them is, again, it's just if their values are a bit off. So as an example, I remember many moons ago, I had a guy had a 3 months notice period, obviously long relationship all the way through it, made sure he was happy with it, etc., etc., etc. And then on the at midnight on the night before he was due to start, he sent an email to the CEO just saying he changed his mind and he wasn't going to do it. Now, literally, things can happen, but everything about that was horrific. One, that he'd left it for the 3 months.
Yeah.
Two, that he didn't have the gumption to at least phone the guy involved and let him know. Similarly with myself, it's just about how you handle yourself, really. Ultimately, I think if you treat your relationships as a very human relationship and do the right things and you're true to your own values, then I can honestly say, in all the time I've done this, there are only 3 people, either from a client or candidate perspective, that I would never deal with again. And all 3 of those are because they're just awful people.
That's great. And it's probably good that we're not naming them, because I just had this moment of fear when I asked the question. I'm just like, crap, what if Neil says Steve when I was working with you? But
No.
we're gonna gloss past that bit, I think.
Yeah.
So just kind of building from there, if you had to describe the ideal candidate who consistently comes across well, so not necessarily the most experienced or with the most acclaimed CV, just someone who kind of gets through and gets offers, what do you see them doing that others aren't?
They're the solution provider. So they go in and their entire mindset is, how do I make things better for you? How do I get things done? What they don't do is go in with a mindset of, right, I need to tear things up, going to cause chaos. I need to go in. It's all about, how do I become the solution? So they look at the job description and they can identify clearly from there where there are issues. They go and do their research around that business and they assess job description versus what they're actually seeing. So, do that whole customer testing piece. And they're able to articulate when they go into interview. So obviously a lot of the examples I can give you, Steve, are more from an operations contact center perspective. They'll be able to articulate when they go into that interview what's going, inverted commas, wrong with that business and where they add the value and make it better. So rather than going in with, I guess, really high level holistic ideas, they go in with, here's the solution. These are the things I've identified. This is the value I can bring to you.
That's great. And do you think there's anything candidates could do in their first conversation with the recruiter that would kind of articulate that they're in a position to do that, or that would change how you'd work with them?
The understanding that it's a 360 relationship. Don't go into those relationships or those conversations in the mindset. Now, it might well be that when you speak to that recruiter, it becomes a very transactional relationship, because the recruiters have that mindset, which basically means they're not very good. So, you should be able to identify that pretty early. But it's a 360 relationship. So going with the understanding of, listen, I want to use you and I want to work with you, and I value what you're going to tell me. And ultimately, how can you make things better, easier, simpler for me to navigate this process? Because it's super stressful. We all know that finding a job is one of the most stressful things you can do. So if you find your brood and they can tell you how to make this better for you, great. But then from the flip, if you can say to that recruiter, how can I help you? what can I do for you? You might have left a job, but if you can make an introduction to someone who still works in that company and go, look, if I can get you involved with these guys, how can I do that? You then become a marketable asset, because not only are you saying to the recruiter, I get it, I understand what this is about, you're also showing commerciality, which any recruiter is going to love.
That's great advice. Brilliant. And then I'm thinking again of the audience of the podcast, kind of anyone who's been navigating redundancy a while, so months more than weeks. And, when they're starting to feel it and kind of that panicked feeling, do you have any particular advice in terms of how they proceed with their job search?
It's easy for me to say on the other side of the fence, don't panic. Don't go into spray and pray. Don't go into, I'm just going to apply for everything. Take a step back, probably almost do a bit of root cause analysis type stuff. What have I applied for? Have a look at it. Why didn't you get to it? Why didn't you get the interview? Why didn't you get the job? And then start to think, okay, so here's the 10 things I've been for. What's the common themes here? Like, if you're getting down to the last 2, last 3, last 4, that sort of thing, you're probably not doing much wrong, is the reality. But if you're not opening up the door and you're not getting through the door, then you need to have a look about, okay, so the CV's got to be wrong. Or I'm just applying for the wrong things. Am I going in at the right level? Do I need to adjust expectations here against this market? But I think the root cause analysis piece will probably tell people a lot about where their search is going wrong. And that might be about industry that you're going after. It might be about, like we say, levels. And it might be about, okay, so if I look at my CV now versus that job description, and I was the hiring manager, would I have given me an interview? And be really honest with yourself.
Yeah.
Because if you are reading it and going, didn't get that right, that at least gives you something to work with moving forward. Whereas if you get your mindset into everyone else is wrong, I'm brilliant, these people are clearly idiots and they don't understand the value that I add, it's not going to get you anywhere. Some real home truth stuff is the only way that you're going to move yourself forward.
That's fantastic. Neil, I so appreciate your time and your thoughts on this. I think just before we close, if someone listening wants to work with you or find a recruiter like, what's their best avenue to find out more?
The best avenue is, stated a couple of times, is your own network. Find out via your own network who people like, who they recommend, and even finding out, what their strengths and weaknesses are. So say, why would you recommend them? What made them good? And just dig a little deeper rather than, I like Neil, he's a nice lad. He'll talk to you about cricket, football, music, get what the value is. And then equally, from a self-plug perspective, if you do want to work with someone like me, then go and have a look. My details are on the LinkedIn page for Merje and for Ginger. It'd be great to have a chat and understand that if you deal with the right recruiters, it's not all about they're just going to sell to you. It's just about, let's have a conversation. Maybe there's something there, maybe there's not.
Brilliant. And we'll get the links in the episode description as well, so they can go direct from that. And final thing before we close, and I ask this question of all my interviews, and maybe a little bit different for you because you've got kind of a dual aspect view on this, but the question I like to ask is kind of, what is your least favorite interview question? But you can probably choose whether it's your least favorite to ask a candidate or to have to field yourself. So you can go with whichever you prefer.
I hate any interview question, the sort of classic quirky ones that everyone knows about. But, the whole, if you're an animal, what would you be? If you could sell me a pen. When it's all this, they're trying to, assess personality traits. Well, I just think they're a nonsense. And for me personally, it would completely turn me off to that business. Because ultimately, again, going back to what we were saying before, assess me on against the role, against the value I'm going to add. Don't assess me against some absolute nonsense. I'll go with nonsense.
Yeah. You just reminded me, I remember reading years ago, there was when Jasper Carrot, the comedian, was a big name in the UK. there was this interview practice at the time where they would have Jasper Carrot's poster in the interview room, and one of the questions would be, who's your favorite comedian? And if you said Jasper Carrot, you wouldn't get the job because it didn't show independent thinking. And it's that whole kind of the trick questions of, well, this is going to be the thing that defines whether that person's going to be great in the business.
It is a nonsense. I'll be honest. It's an absolute. I hate the genuine, and I do use that word in the right context. I hate that sort of stuff. What animal would you be? What does that mean? I have no idea. Yeah, my brain would literally, if someone asked me that in an interview, my brain would literally shut down.
Yeah, I just say polar bear. I'd have a reason, but that's it.
Just polar bear. That's it.
Yeah, there we go. Neil, thank you so much for your time today. We'll draw it to a close, but thank you.
No problem. Thank you very much.
Hi there, I'm Nick, and when you're not listening to the weekly wisdom from Stevie and in breaking down the strange things happening in your head while navigating redundancy, please check out my fortnightly podcast, Starting Over. Every other week we explore the stories of incredible individuals through 10 key questions. We dive into the challenges of a career setback or break, personal growth in this time and lessons learned along the way, practical tips to help others facing similar situations, and ultimately a chance to showcase the person behind the CV. Join me as we listen to these journeys and remember collectively that career setbacks and breaks are not the end, but the start of your next chapter. Find Starting Over on wherever you get your podcasts from, but for now, back to Stevie and take care.
So I came away from the conversation with Neil thinking that I had notes to scribble for myself, for my own selfish purposes. And it did make me think that between these 4 podcast walls that are imaginary, I need to make a confession. I own an umbrella that looks like a samurai sword. And not inspired by a samurai sword. It had like an actual fabric scabbard. There's a curved handle, and you draw the umbrella out of it like you're about to settle a dispute rather than walk to the shops in the rain. Now, 20-year-old me thought this was the single coolest object he owned, and 20-year-old me would unsheath it on a drizzly high street with the quiet confidence of someone who believed people were watching and impressed, rather than the actual reality, which was people glancing over, clocking a grown man wielding what was unmistakably a Ninja Turtles weapon of choice and quietly rearranging their walking route. Now, 40-something me has had a couple of years to reflect, and 40-something me thinks there are very few things in this world more cringeworthy than a middle-aged man brandishing a sword umbrella at a bus stop. But yet, and this is the part that actually matters, I still own it. I still use it occasionally. It does live in the garage now, but it is used. Because underneath the slightly mortifying presentation of it, it is, by some distance, the best umbrella I've ever owned. It doesn't turn inside out. It doesn't snap a spoke the first time the wind has an opinion. It was built properly, bought before I needed it, and has quietly outperformed every £3 corner shop umbrella I ever panic bought while absolutely soaked already. And that, awkwardly, is kind of the whole point of today's episode. Nobody buys a good umbrella while they're standing in the rain. When you're already drenched, you're not making considered, sensible purchasing decisions. You are grabbing whatever is nearest, and what's nearest is usually a flimsy, badly made, and destined to fail you exactly when you need it the most style umbrella. The people who stay dry are the ones who sorted their umbrella of choice out before the forecast turned. Not because they were more organised necessarily, but because they understood that some things work a lot better when you don't leave them until an emergency. And the recruiter relationship is exactly that same shape. Neil said something a couple of times in that conversation that I wanted to pull out properly because it's easy to let it slide past. This works best when it isn't transactional. When you don't show up for the first time mid-redundancy, CV in hand, needing something immediately from someone who has no context on you whatsoever. The candidates who do well are the ones who built that relationship before the rain started, who treated it as an ongoing thing rather than a one-off ask. So here's what that actually looks like in practice. 3 things, and I want to give these to you properly rather than a vague gesture at the word networking, because that still makes my skin crawl slightly, and I suspect it does for some of you as well. But the first thing is finding the right recruiter before you need one, and find them by specialism, not by speed. Now, obviously, if you're already navigating redundancy, that doesn't mean that you can't now do this. But the concept is that you don't register with the first 5 agencies that show up when you type into Google, "I need a job." You look at recruiters who specialize specifically in your sector or your functional industry, the ones who already understand the roles, the language, the market rate, and are the actual hiring managers. A generalist who's never placed anyone in your field of expertise is starting from zero on your behalf. A specialist already has the context, which means when something does come up, you're not explaining your entire career history from scratch. They've already get it. Secondly, give them more than a CV. And this is the part that turns that transactional relationship into an actual one. Because a CV tells a recruiter what you've done. It doesn't tell them what you're actually looking for, what you'd rule out, what kind of environment you'd thrive in versus quietly wither in. Have an actual conversation, even when you're not job hunting, even when everything is fine. Just about your trajectory, not your history. The recruiters who can vouch for you properly, the way a good best man speech vouches for someone, are the ones who know more than your job titles. And thirdly, stay in touch on your terms, not just theirs. So this is the one that I think most of us can get backwards. It's very easy to wait for a recruiter to reach out, and if nothing comes, you could have the assumption that the relationship's gone cold and you move on. Flip it around. A short, occasional check-in, a market update, still keeping an eye on things, anything interesting across your desk lately? It costs you 2 minutes and keeps you visible. Recruiters are genuinely working with hundreds of candidates. The ones who stay top of mind aren't the loudest. They're the ones who showed up consistently in small, low-effort ways over time. And that's the difference between being, that CV from back in March, and being someone they actually think of when the right thing lands. None of that is complicated. None of it requires you to become a different kind of person or perform enthusiasm you don't feel. It just requires it being done before the rain starts, rather than afterwards. So what's the takeaway? If there is one thing to take from today, it's this. The relationship you have with a recruiter isn't a transaction you make when you need something. It's something you build steadily in the dry, long before you're at the bus stop getting drenched, wishing that you'd sorted it out sooner. Thank you again, Neil, for being so generous with your time and your honesty today. And thank you, dear listeners, as always, for listening. And if any of this has landed, if you've nodded, laughed, or mildly chuckled, then do me a small favor, follow or subscribe wherever you're listening. It helps the show find other people who are wandering around in this weird in-between bit. And if you know someone in their now what era, send them this episode. It'd be massively helpful. And whatever you take from today, get your umbrella sorted before it starts raining. Metaphorically, obviously, but possibly also literally because, Britain. And if you're asking yourself now what, you're in the right place. Before you go, if any of this has been useful, please do me a favor and follow the show wherever you're listening. And if you've got 60 seconds and an opinion, leave a review. It helps other people find the show, and it also stops me wondering if I'm turning into some sort of audio hermit. And if you want more than just my voice turning up in your ears once a week, head to theinvisibleq.com. It's a support platform for people navigating redundancy, built by people who've actually been through it and remember how strange and exhausting the whole thing is. But for now, thank you for listening. Until next time.